What up, TCK Potters? I'm your host, Sky Guasco. This is episode 192 of the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Podcast, joined always by Lukas Kaser. And today we have a very, very special guest, old friend of mine, former Eugene, Oregon Duck alum himself, Jonathan Rifkind, joining the podcast once again. He was here last year to recap the NFL draft, this time to preview the NFL draft and hopefully bring him back to recap as well. We're doing the quarterbacks today, but first, Jonathan, please reintroduce yourself to the Candlestick Kids.
First of all, I just want to say how appreciative of this I am to be part of the 8th till 200 episode of the Candlestick Podcast. That's pretty cool.
Thanks,
I want to know what the 200, what that milestone ends up creating for you guys, because that's a pretty big deal to hit 200. It's a lot of talking. Yeah, so I'm a professional podcaster. Some might like to say I host the Pac-12 podcast with Ryan Leaf. Of course, a perennial bust in his NFL days, but has really turned his life around, and now he's an ESPN analyst and does all this great stuff. So it's a privilege to work with him. I run my own sports media company where we broadcast premier high school sports in Southern California. And I do some dabbling in the collegiate broadcasting realm as well, with Loyola Marymount University here in LA, and some community colleges as well.
Excellent, man. Well, thank you so much for coming back. It's always a pleasure. You and I have been working in the sports thing quite a bit together. Actually, you and I met, I believe you were broadcasting, the first time we met, you were broadcasting a local high school football game
South
here.
Eugene versus Wilson High School football. I remember like it was yesterday.
My man. So you're doing, and I think what's interesting, the reason I love having you on for these collegiate conversations as well as the NFL draft previews is obviously Lukas is our guy here on the podcast that dives deep into rookies and dynasty rankings and things, where I'm more of a redraft guy and kind of a, old school players, if you will. But I think what's interesting about you and your background is that you are literally in the high school scene heavily, and then follow these kids to college, and then you see them in college, and then you work for the Pac-12 network. So you're talking college ball all day, but you're also an NFL head too. So you really have a long lineage of perspective that not many other people can put a reality to. So I appreciate that. And obviously working with Ryan has got to be interesting. I mean, we all know his history in the NFL, but all that aside, you've always spoken nothing but positively, working with him professionally, and that he's taught you a lot, and you had some great opportunities hanging out at the Rich Eisen studio, if I remember correctly, and some other things. So you've definitely been around, man, and I'm super proud of you for doing that. So thanks again for coming back on, and let's have some fun, man. This is going to be a 4-part series here. So this is the Monday of draft week. Now, obviously, this is a very unique, definitely the most unique so far, and maybe the most unique ever again, NFL draft this season with the coronavirus and everything else happening. We're going to be having this at home. So interested to hear your take quickly on how you think that's actually going to go. Are we going to get more behind the scenes things? Is it going to be business as usual? How that's going to work? And then we're going to be breaking down the quarterbacks today. Tomorrow will be running backs, and then Wednesday will be wide receivers, and then tight ends on Thursday, the morning of the draft. And we'll have some deeper sleepers as well, maybe some IDP names, maybe some extra guys that we don't cover here in depth, just so those of you in dynasty leagues have a better opportunity. So I've talked a lot. Jonathan's talked a lot. Lukas, we'll bring you in here real quick, brother. How are you doing? And what do you think we should expect maybe from this teledraft coming up this year?
Well, I don't think I can top Jonathan's intro for the episode, so I'll just jump right into my thoughts on the draft. I'm hoping it's like a big Zoom call type situation. I hope that's like what we see on, well, it's going to be on ESPN, right? Like it's going to be like normally on like a TV in a way. Like it's not going to, okay, I don't really know how that was going to play out. So I'm hoping it's like some big Zoom call. And I saw there was a list of 58 players sort of attending the virtual meeting somehow, so I'd be interested to see how they kind of work all that in. There's a lot of prop bets out there right now to see how many technical difficulties we're going to get, and then how many people are going to be in a room at a time. So
take the over.
I know, we'll see how that all plays out, but I'm excited. I mean, obviously I'm excited for the draft in general, but I'm excited to have some sort of sports anything to grab onto for a while.
Jonathan, how about you?
It's going to be interesting. I'm excited because it's going to give everybody a scapegoat. In sports, we always talk about how fans are not always, they're always looking for reasons to be upset, whether it's with their own team, if their teams aren't very good, i.e. every New York fan for every New York sport, or your GM makes a poor decision that you perceive to be unbeneficial to your team. So this is just going to add an extra layer of rationalization for the sports fan, for the NFL fan, if their team doesn't make a decision that they're happy with. But it's also going to have a profound sociological impact, I think, on the teams themselves, the decisions that they have to make, the communication aspects of all of it. The schematics behind this entire operation are going to be fascinating. I think it's going to work, but I don't think it's going to be very pretty. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see how this mess unfolds.
I totally agree. And I'll just add my last thing. I think you guys hit it. Lucas, I agree with you. I hope it's a big Zoom call. I think we're going to get some more. I think we're going to get some more behind the scenes things that we're not used to. We get the phone call and the mom hug and the like fist bump and the picture and the behind, but I think we're going to get like some real shit. And
do you think that more people are going to be relaxed because they're in the comfort of their own homes 100%. As opposed to being on the set?
Yeah. And if they're following the rules, then they may have one person at their house, like maybe their parent or their sibling or whomever is like, that person that helped like get them to this point to celebrate will be with them, but they're not going to have this group of 30 people in their living room like they do every year celebrating. Like It's not going to, so that moment of like, holy shit, I got drafted. Like that excitement that we see every year of, tears and like the emotion is kind of be like, where's everybody at to celebrate with me?
Like one hug, not 40.
Yeah, fist bump yourself. I think that'll be a little interesting, so we'll see. But I'm excited to see that as well. I also think it's going to be kind of a relief for sports fans of any kind because we haven't had any sports, at all because of what's going on. And other than watching highlights and reruns and all these other things, you haven't had anything live. Now, of course, this isn't a sporting game per se, but it's a huge event. And if you're a football fan, this is kind of almost second tier to the Super Bowl and then the rest of the season. So it'll be very interesting. And I think it'll go off one way or another, but I agree with you. It probably will not be pretty. Well, let's get into it, man. We've got a handful of names to cover here in depth. We're going to cover Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Jacob Eason, Jake Fromm, and Jordan Love in depth here today. And then if we have some extra names, we might throw them at the end of the podcast or at the end of the week. So make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel right now, leave a rate and review, and let us know if we miss any of your players that you want to break down, and we can spend some time there and give you our rookie bio for them. Let's start up at the top here. Of course, not every single person has Joe Burrow as their number one quarterback coming into the NFL. A lot of that has to do with landing spot. There's much conversation that it's almost a guarantee that he'll go to Cincinnati, but that is not in tow. And we see it every single year that these conversations happen and last minute audibles are called on draft day. So we're not going to make assumptions, but we will start with Joe Burrow out of LSU. And it's basically Joe or Tua at the top. Jonathan, we'll kick it to you first. Realistically, who do you think it'll be? If it's different, who do you want it to be at number one overall? And then give me your thoughts on Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I can't wait to call back this moment because I think we'll get to it. We'll get to it. So I'm putting a pin in this one moment right now because you said something, but we're not there yet. It's going to be Burrow. He's going to Cincinnati. I don't know. I know that there's conversations about, he's average size. Is that really the system? Is this really the place that he's going to be able to develop? Answers yes to all of them, I think. I don't want to beat a dead horse because we all know everything about Joe Burrow at this point. I don't know why he wouldn't go anywhere else besides Cincinnati. I don't think he should be the number one pick because I think Chase Young is the best player in this draft. But Cincinnati has the number one pick and they need a quarterback, so this is going to be their guy.
Yeah, Lucas? I mean, I think the only part that like kind of this, I've been seeing a lot of like people been giving him like perfect ratings, perfect grades in their scale, and then you go down to Jalen Hurts and they don't like a guy like that. But I don't. We only saw 1 year. Obviously, we've talked about that on the podcast before. I just don't get where the grading system doesn't take into account the other 2 years he didn't start, or maybe his junior year. So he is the number one pick. He will be the starter week one unless that Andy Dalton beats him out if there's no training camp or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like in Cincinnati, when he lands there, he will need to do a lot more than he was asked to do last year. And I guess we'll kind of see how that plays out. I do have Tua as my number one, based on purely just talent alone. Obviously, Tua might not start the season, or who knows where he's going to land if it's the Dolphins, someone trades up. But I think Joe Burrow, yeah, consensus 101 in the NFL draft. Yeah, I mean, not much to talk about since we don't want to break down his career season, best college quarterback season of all time.
Jonathan, if Tua was 100% healthy and we weren't worried about all of these potentially failed behind the scenes exams and physicals and whatnot, if he was 100% healthy, do you think there would be more of a gap, or do you think Joe would even be the guaranteed?
I think Joe's the guaranteed. I don't even have Tua higher than Justin Herbert. Call it my Oregon homerisms, call it the fact that I cover the Pac-12, what have you. Tua's a great quarterback, and his snap to release time is quicker than any quarterback that you're going to get out of this draft. It's going to be quicker than almost any quarterback in the NFL. I think Kyler Murray clocked at the quickest this year. So Tua sort of approaches the game the same way. He's short, injury durability, like you said, that is his biggest question. And you sort of pose the hypothetical if that wasn't a problem. I just don't see him being the prototypical success story in the NFL with his makeup, with the frame that he possesses as a quarterback. I think Joe Burrow is a more prototypical NFL quarterback. I think Justin Herbert, even though he's bigger, is a more prototypical NFL quarterback. I think Tua has a higher ceiling just because he's so much more explosive and exciting. That's sort of the Zion Williamson complex. This guy's really fun to watch, so we're going to love him and we're going to rate him really high. But in reality, what have we seen from him that the other two or other three big quarterbacks in this draft haven't shown this season either? And for me, that's what's missing.
Also, you always have to take into consideration, not taking away from Joe Burrow per se, but you have to take into account the rest of his teammates. Right. I mean, a big conversation this year is that LSU in general is just a fucking machine. I mean, they've got multiple receivers getting drafted, their running backs getting drafted, their quarterback is number one overall. Half of their defense every single year gets drafted. They're pretty incredible. Great segue. Of course, let's just jump right into Tua. Lukas, you have him actually over Joe Burrow. Why is that?
I mean, it's just like I can't place a ranking variable on injury to me, because obviously, like, as of now, we're just ranking on pure talent. I just think he's better. Obviously, I don't think Herbert or Hurts or Burrow are bad. I think they're all going to be good NFL quarterbacks. I don't know. It just seems to me like Tua is sort of locked in to go top three. I've been hearing a lot of rumors to where, like, the Dolphins want Herbert more. Whether Herbert's a top 5 pick, I don't know. We'll see come draft time. But I just think Tua, to me, we saw it for the last 2.5 years, however you want to, because he got hurt and then he didn't play half his freshman year, however you want to quantify that. We saw it with him. We saw it he came in and won the SEC championship against Georgia in like the third quarter. We just saw the composure he had. But yeah, I totally agree. He's small. He's mobile, but he's like not really mobile when you actually watch it. It's kind of scary. He takes a lot of hits that he shouldn't. He's not the quickest. He's not going to be the quickest post-injury. And he's a lefty too, which, I mean, that we shouldn't say that's why he's not going to be good in the NFL, but I mean, you don't see many lefty quarterbacks.
It's different.
Yeah, like it is something that you'd have to take into account. So he's going to need a team to buy into him being the starter. Everyone likes to play they might wait use a bridge quarterback for Ryan Fitzpatrick or Tyrod Taylor, the main two, for a while, and then bring him in. But that doesn't really add up, because if you're going to bring in Fitzpatrick and Tua, or two completely different quarterbacks, you would be completely switching your offense midway through the season. But as of now, he's my one. I don't want to say it's guaranteed to change post-draft, but I have a feeling it might. If I really fall in love with Burrow, or even if like Herbert lands on the Patriots or something like that, I would put Herbert as the one. But yeah, just as of now, based off talent alone, he's my one. But it's not like he's not a tier above the others. It's a very close race for me right now.
A lot of this, of course, has to do with the landing spot. Of course, we go into every single draft season with the top 3 quarterbacks, top 3 running backs, top 3 every position, and it's almost guaranteed via ESPN and Yahoo and CBS and all the shit that, like, this is where these guys are going to land. So let's start talking day 2, day 3 guys, and then in the first 5 picks. Things hit the fan every single time.
Daniel Jones goes to the Giants, and like no one actually knows what happens, and it switches everything up every single year.
There's talks already.
Adam Schefter has the best job because he gets paid to be wrong year in and year out. He tracks these guys. He gives us everything we need. And then most of the time, you have a 70% success rate. You get your contract renewed by ESPN the next year, and you're good to go. It's a great job. You don't have to be right. You could get a C. You could get a C average and still get paid $4 million to try and predict the draft. So if you want to pursue NFL jobs, this is one of those jobs to pursue. Let me tell you.
But Schefter's the man because he's a perfect example of like don't shoot the messenger. Like
Right.
Schefter's not telling you his opinions, or if he does,
everyone,
it's very
everyone
rarely.
tells him what to say.
Yeah, he's
Right.
he's telling you what he's hearing
Mhm.
and what's coming out of this camp, and this
But
beat reporter told me this and all that.
but the compilation of that data ends up becoming so it varies week to week because different people have different opinions on all these different guys. So just again, it's just a very interesting from our perspective. It's interesting because especially as you do research for this, obviously we want to know what all the big analysts are saying from all the different networks and also the conference guys, the beat writers, all those different guys. But everybody has a different perspective, and it's what does your perception of successful, in this case, a successful fantasy NFL player look like, and whose perspective do you agree with the most? And that's why I think that, like with Tua, I don't have him above Joe Burrow. I don't have him above Justin Herbert. I think Jordan Love has a little bit more potential, even though he's not a good downfield passer, just because I think that the intangibles for these guys are above what Tua possesses already. But again, that's how I perceive a successful NFL quarterback, but you could perceive it completely different. And that's why our opinions are so different on this.
Well, let's jump into Justin Herbert then. Of course, you work with the Pac-12 network, so you are more hands-on than both of us for sure. But probably, most listeners, if not all, just with your career path. Of course, I'm a Duck. I'm very open about my still love for Royce Freeman here on the podcast, just because I just mentioned to Lucas, I found my original fantasy football draft from 2009 the other day. I went through my roster and I drafted Jonathan Stewart in the 3rd round. Still feel good about that pick.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to stay out of the Duck homerism here on this one, but I will turn it over to you. Obviously, you're a Duck alum as well, but just professionally, please break down Justin Herbert and. Also, again, you've got him over Tua, which I think there's whispers in the bushes that some other people do. Some teams do, I think. And again, I'm not sure if it's because they really think apples to apples, Justin Herbert's better than Tua, or if it's Tua has injury concerns, we don't want to deal with that. We're going to go with the safer bet with Herbert. So, what's your opinion and why?
Yeah, I know. I think you nailed it with the why teams may value Herbert ahead of Tua. Obviously the biggest conversation with Herbert is his leadership. The idea that he's quiet in the locker room, he's very cerebral, he's composed, very intelligent, but he doesn't connect. He may not connect, especially if he's a rookie and being asked to start or to play big minutes. He doesn't always connect with all the big guys on this team that he needs to help motivate or build chemistry with or what have you. That's bullshit. Look, this guy's from Eugene, Oregon, right? He went to Sheldon High School. He was a 3-star quarterback who wanted to play basketball for all intents and purposes before he realized that he had an arm. He was really good in the pocket, and he was also, multifaceted. He could run, and all those tools built up what is now the quarterback that you have before you. He doesn't have the worldly experience that you see from a lot of these guys who come from Southern California. Is my favorite example because we have more high profile athletes than anywhere else in the country. High school athletes going to big name schools. DJ Ugalele is a perfect example, going to Clemson from St. John Bosco, right? Like, these guys have more worldly experience because they're trained in high school a certain way, because they're going to different states for college. Herbert's not like that. He doesn't have that experience. So I understand why that's a concern. But if he's going to another team, if he's going to Miami, if he's going to LA, which I think he'd be perfect with the Chargers, that's not a concern for me, because I think that those are locations that he could express the leadership, the cerebral leadership that he possesses. In terms of physical talent, he's a prototypical quarterback, 6'6", the height that you want. People say he might be too tall. I don't think you're really too tall at 6'6", 6'8" maybe. But no, he moves very well. He makes good decisions. Obviously, there were some questions about his downfield accuracy this season. But you could thank Johnny Johnson for dropping half of those passes also. Catching radius, his ability to get the ball in the catching radius of his wide receivers is uncanny. And he's shown that for 3 years as quarterback. So yeah, I don't see him being a bust. I don't know if he's going to be a boom per se. but I do think he'll be at the very least, a consistent quarterback in this league.
And there was similar contradictions to leadership with Marcus Mariota, correct?
Yeah, I think Marcus was actually quieter. I think Justin, he has a willingness to connect with you on your level. Marcus had he was like stern. It was like, this is how it needs to be executed and this is how you have to execute it. And I think that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And actually Coach Cristobal for Oregon is very much like that too. That's his biggest criticism, is that he's very much, this is the way it needs to be done. So do it this way. We can't really adjust a different way. And that's why Oregon's had a rotation of different coordinators over the last couple of years. I think that there's been management differences between some of the coordinators in Cristobal. And that's sort of what Mariota's critiques were, but Herbert's not like that. Herbert's a lot more, I want to connect with you on your level. How can we make this work in an equal partnership type of way?
With you working with our local radio station here at the U of O over the last couple of years and being, again, quite close to the teams here at Oregon University, but also just in the community of Eugene. The last handful of years, you mentioned you went to Sheldon High School just down the street here from me. What is your favorite thing, fandom or not, about Justin Herbert specifically?
Oh, well, it was hard because I was only a fan for one season. My freshman year, I was a fan, and Vernon Adams was the quarterback. And then I started working on football, and I couldn't be a fan anymore my sophomore year. So my relationship from a fan or just coverage standpoint with Justin Herbert is very different than a lot of different, fans of the game, because they're seeing him from just his fundamental athleticism, and I'm seeing him from interviews with him or sit downs or watching his rapport in practices. I think that he's just the way he composes himself. Everything he does is well thought out, right? He's going to put his utmost effort in every decision that he makes, whether it's on the football field, in the classroom, which, he was the scholarship athlete of the year again, because he's had a 4.2 GPA in molecular biology. I mean, his ability to process and the output and the execution and everything that he does is uncanny. And so I think that that's my favorite aspect of watching him develop and grow as this quarterback, is it's not just his quarterback, it's his mind, it's his rapport, it's his personable assets, all of these traits that you need to be successful, not just in football, but in life. And I mean, he possesses that more so than I've seen most other athletes.
Excellent. Thank you for the inside scoop. It's nice for me personally. It's cool to have the Duck insider stuff, if you will. But just in general, I think it's cool to have a deeper dive on certain players like Justin that you've actually met and spent time with to get that personal touch. So I appreciate that breakdown. So really, regardless of how you have them ranked, if you will, across the landscape, it's pretty much decided that Joe, Tua, and Justin are the big three, if you will, at the quarterback position coming into the 2020 draft. Let's move on to the second tier, if you will, second, third, maybe, depending on how you think of these guys. Let's talk about Jalen Hurts, Jacob Easton, Jake Fromm, and Jordan Love. Six, I'm just doing the math right now. 6 out of the 7 quarterbacks have a first name that starts with J. I just want to throw that out as a trivia question later for you. Let's start with Jalen Hurts here, Oklahoma. Obviously, he had quite an interesting move back and forth from 2 perennial schools. Decided to take it up with Oklahoma. Had a great season. Lukas, we'll start with you. How do you feel about Jalen Hurts in general? And he's kind of another one of these, runners if he needs to, but he also has a big arm. How do you feel about Jalen Hurts?
I mean, don't think of this as a comparison, but this is the exact same scenario which we saw Lamar Jackson when he came into the NFL. A guy that produced for multiple years in college and maybe just got foreshadowed by whatever the case may be. This year it was because we saw Joe Burrow at an elite level. And I think the tipping point of Hurts, NFL credit, was when they got killed by LSU in the playoffs. I think that's when everyone switched gears and was like, Joe Burrow is much, much better. Jalen Hurts kind of sucks. This is what we saw come NFL draft. Teams were like, Lamar can't do it. Lamar can't do it because whatever the case may be. He couldn't throw, apparently. And then he went 32 to the Ravens, which took a special case because the team is going to have to buy into Jalen Hurts. You have to mold your offense around a quarterback like that. And then we saw what Lamar Jackson did last year. Now, I'm not saying Jalen Hurts is Lamar Jackson, but I'm saying there's nothing in terms of production, in terms of career that he's had in college that doesn't make him a candidate to be a starter in the NFL. So I'm higher on him than the rest. I have him as my QB4. That's, like I said, talent alone, but I think that he can do it if the team buys in. I don't know what team that's going to be in the NFL. I mean, I didn't think the Ravens were going to they had Joe Flacco. I didn't think they were going to go get Lamar Jackson, so some team could maybe make that sort of transition. But I just don't want people to think that he's not a good NFL quarterback. I use Lamar Jackson. That's like the biggest comp to me of like the scenario and the situation he's in right now. And he produced last year. If it wasn't for Joe Burrow, he was probably the Heisman candidate just off the numbers he had alone, rushing and passing. But yeah, that's my thoughts on him. That could be a little biased, not that I'm an Oklahoma fan or anything, but I feel like he's kind of taken the short end of the stick due to Joe Burrow sort of emerging last year.
Jonathan?
I like basically everything that you said. The only thing I disagree with is the comp. I think that his style is perfect, the perfect comparison to Lamar Jackson. Where I have a problem with it is the confidence. I don't think that he has the confidence. Lamar Jackson had all the confidence in the world coming out of Louisville. This guy took a program that isn't inclined football-wise, right? It's a basketball school, and turned it into a football program for the time that he was there. And his confidence never waned. Jalen Hurts had an incredible start to the year. I mean, explosive, one of the best starts you will see. He reminds me, this is a really, really weird comparison, but I've been watching old basketball games before I go to bed in quarantine, and he reminds me of the start that Rajon Rondo had in 2008 with the Celtics, where like he had like 95 assists in the first 6 games of the season, and everybody was flipping out that this guy's the best point guard, and then he plateaued. And that's exactly what happened with Jalen Hurts this year, because he started relying more on his legs than his arm. And that was the difference that I saw from the first 4 games to the final 8 games, final 8 games, was that his confidence in the pocket waned, and he looked to tuck and run way more often. 15 for 31 for 217 yards and an interception in the title game.
Yeah, that was bad. That was a bad game.
Right. So that to me is a red flag. I think that he would be really good in a system that will need him in a few years. Like Tampa Bay, Green Bay are the two ideas that come to mind, or the 2 teams that come to mind for me. You put him in Tampa Bay, you give him the quarterback whisperer, you get him behind Brady for 2 seasons, Brady retires. Jalen Hurts could be your guy. I think that he's a project, but obviously, like you said, Lukas, I mean, this dude has proven that he is. I mean, he's a stat sheet stuffer. But you need to have that confidence in the NFL to throw the ball, and that to me was what was lacking towards the end of the season.
Mm-hmm. It's when they lost to K-State too, is when that tipping point. That is literally what happened. Because I mean, he still produced like after that, but like that happened, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, Oklahoma's not winning at all." Like off the train, and then they moved down to LSU, Alabama, Clemson. So yeah, I agree. That was kind of what happened last year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a great comp. And of course, after the season that we had with Lamar Jackson, anybody who doesn't fully pay attention per se is gasping at your Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson comp. But I've been pretty vocal on the podcast for a number of years, actually, even more so last year when Lamar Jackson was behind Uncle Flacco, and it was just a matter of time. And then, of course, he had the second half and almost came back and beat the Chargers in 1 quarter, down 3 touchdowns in the playoffs and all this. And then, of course, last year was historic. But him at Louisville was incredible. He won the Heisman, almost won it again. He was an incredible passer, and then he just didn't do it for the Ravens there. They have a similar body type, both 6'1", 6'2", 210, 215. Obviously, Lamar's a little bit faster, but I think that, Jalen Hurts may be a little bit more shifty. I think you guys both hit it on the head. I don't really have much to add for Jalen Hurts, although I can't really put analysis, if you will, behind the reason I think this, but for some reason his body language concerns me, and I don't really know what to say about it. The stats are there, I understand. Alabama, Oklahoma, kid's incredible, but for some reason, I'm not excited about him. If he was on my team, I think I would be feeling like I was settling versus going for it. And I'm not really sure how to express that, but he's
definitely a project. So are all of these. This is one of the years where I think we have a set tier 1 of NFL talent. And then you could just based off rankings, everyone has after those top 3 completely different, just because you don't know what to do with them. So I do agree that it's interesting because he should have confidence. I don't know why he doesn't. Like, he was an Alabama quarterback for 2 years. Yeah, he lost to Tua. Okay, but Tua also was amazing in those 2 years that he lost the job to him. So yeah, I get your. It's. I hope the Saints get him, and we're gonna go through it at the end. But that's my sort of pick
Oh,
there for him.
interesting.
Cool. We will dive into where you guys think these guys, where you would like to see them land. Maybe like your heart would like to see them land, but where your brain thinks that they'll actually get picked with the draft order coming up. All right, let's move on to Jacob Eason from Washington, another Pac-12 guy. Jonathan, we'll start with you here with Jacob Eason.
He should not have left college. That is one of the first things the first thing I texted to Ryan after he announced that he was coming out was, this is a mistake, and Ryan agreed with me. Eason is a great quarterback. He was the McDonald's All-American Player of the Year at a high school in Washington. Obviously, he went to Georgia, ended up transferring back to Washington because of Jake Fromm. It's he's good. He had 3,100 yards and 23 touchdowns, but in a conference that has basically given up more passing yards than any other Power 5 conference, yes, more than the ACC even, it's a little bit underwhelming, especially where he came from, the hype surrounding him, the fact that he went back home to Seattle. Was playing in a Jimmy Lake offense that is typically very favorable to pocket passers. We saw it with Jake Browning previously. We were supposed to see with Jacob Eason, and it just never materialized. And his maneuverability is basically zero. He's going to stand in the pocket. He doesn't have the ability to go out of the platform and to make something out of nothing as well as we would like, I think, for an NFL quarterback to have. So one more season, I think, at Washington would have been giving me a lot more confidence in him. He had a really good game against Oregon. That was probably his best game of the season. They lost, but he led a pretty good comeback.
The Utah game was good too.
The Utah game was good. He was underwhelming versus BYU. He was underwhelming versus Washington State. He was underwhelming versus Cal. They lost. I mean, that was the 1 a.m. game, the Cal game that got delayed until 1 a.m. West Coast time. And he was underwhelming in that game. They won by 1. Cal should have won. Oh, no, excuse me. Cal won by 1. Washington lost by 1 because Easton threw away the last 2 drives of the game. So his decision-making it was not very impressive. So for all of those factors, I'm not very high on Jacob Eason. I think that he is a massive project. I know that the first team to talk to him was the Dolphins. I know that there was some conversations about the Patriots maybe taking him and throwing him in as a backup and developing him. But I don't know. I'm not very high on him. I don't really think he has the potential for a grand NFL career. I think he's going to be like Ryan Mallett, where he'll play, but he won't play very much, and he'll be someone that it's like, oh, he's on the roster type deal in a couple of years.
Comes to another Husky quarterback with Jake Locker.
Yeah, I think Locker had a pretty decent start to his NFL career, I think, if I remember correctly.
Tennessee.
It was just injuries that really did him dirty. I think they're both similar quarterbacks. I think Locker had more talent.
Lukas?
I mean, I'm kind of high on Eason, like high enough to put him over Love. That sort of the scenario with that is there's a lot of teams right now in this NFL draft that have veterans that will need I don't want to comp like so he's really good arm talent. I mean, you see that when he throws the ball just in film, and I mean at Georgia, whatever he played preseason, whatever. A lot of the Steelers, Saints, Patriots, Chargers, a lot of teams need a future quarterback. I don't know if that's him, but he's a big project, I agree. But I think if you sat him behind someone like Big Ben, even the Colts, maybe get him with Phillip Rivers for a year. Patriots, Brady's not there, but I mean you could work that out with Bill Belichick and Stidham and Hoyer. The Buccaneers, I just think that he has a lot of potential if he's coached up right to sort of maybe a Big Ben type mentor in the quarterback room. Maybe, I don't know if Rivers is much of a mentor, but the way he might have played for the Chargers. So I see the path to upside, but I agree it was very underwhelming. One, that he lost his job to Jake Fromm, and two, what he did last year. The talent around him wasn't really there, but you still should be able to do something with what you have if you are an NFL-ready quarterback.
Can I ask you guys something as a follow-up? I think it's interesting. You brought up like Ben Roethlisberger as like a mentor. Do you think that the pocket passer style of play in the NFL for the most part is now beginning to wane? Because you look at the first four guys that we talked about: Burrow, Herbert, Tua, and Jalen Hurts. All four of those guys have mobility as part of their game, right? They're mobile quarterbacks in one way or another. Obviously, Tua more than Herbert or Burrow, but like I don't see Ben Roethlisberger as the modern day prototypical quarterback anymore.
No.
And so I don't know if Jacob Eason's style is intuitive enough to adapt to something like that in my mind.
Yeah, even Big Ben though, when he's healthy, like he still moves around in the pocket and run. Not that he runs, but he's able to get out of the pocket. Like really the only guy I think of that really doesn't is like Tom Brady. I don't really know if I can think of, and that's probably just due to age. Like, but I agree. You watch Mahomes last year. The guy had no. I don't know if it's rushing or mobility, whatever you want to call it. Like he didn't show that really in college. He didn't show that his first year. And then last year, the run he had against the Titans in the playoffs, that's the one I always think about when I think of the rushing he had. Like that was literally what like a guy like Russell Wilson can do or does in his NFL career. So I agree that it's definitely changing and it needs to. Like if to beat the Ravens, you got to beat the Ravens half the time. Like you got to know how to stop Lamar Jackson to actually stop him. So I feel like that it is changing. I don't know how quickly it will change, or maybe I feel like some teams will be stubborn and won't buy in maybe at first, but I agree that it definitely is changing.
With the Jonathan, I'm so glad you brought that question up actually, because last year when we recapped the draft, I actually asked you exactly the same question.
Oh, you did. I'm stealing from you now.
No, it's good, honestly, because I was hoping to bring it up eventually. Anyway, I brought it up because we were talking about Kyler Murray and his ability, right? And then as a pocket passer, my response, I guess, is twofold. So first of all, on the Big Ben, the Brady, the Breeze, these kind of guys, Phillip Rivers, who you don't think have any mobility, they have had a lot of rushing yards, and they're not flashy with these young bucks. But the reason they and Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, even over the years have been so productive and dominant, frankly, is because in their 5x5 yard little box, they're quite mobile. And arguably, I would say with some of these like running quarterbacks, the Bradys and the Breezes are actually more mobile and effective inside the pocket, and where they kind of have that sixth sense. They feel it behind them. They see a guy. They predict shit. They can duck out of the way. They take one step forward, which you never seen in the stat box. You don't see on the game film, but that buys that one extra second. They can pull a pass off. Where a runner, and you see it with Lamar Jackson, as much as I love him, you see it all the time. These guys kind of like, look, not there, bail. Because they can, and that's awesome, and they're very effective. Clearly, it's fine. Russell Wilson, I think, is my favorite combination of both. I think he's an incredible pocket passer, but he's also an incredible runner when he wants to be. So I want to dive back really quick here. So last year's quarterbacks drafted of note: Kyler Murray, Daniel Jones, Gardner Minshew, Drew Lock, Dwayne Haskins, Jarrett Stidham, and Will Grier. Of those guys, Kyler Murray had 544 rushing yards. Daniel Jones had 279. Gardner Minshew had 344. Drew Lock only played 4 games, and Dwayne Haskins was kind of in and out as well. Move back to 2 years ago. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold. Josh Rosen hasn't had a chance. Sam Darnold, I would not consider a mobile quarterback. Baker Mayfield, I think, could be if he wanted to be, but I think he still plays a little bit scared. Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson have immediately become 2 of the most effective running quarterbacks in the entire NFL. So I think it's definitely leaning more and growing more that way. But again, not to cop out of the answer, I think so much of it comes down to like the style of offense.
Right.
Like, does Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, do they want a Lamar Jackson type quarterback, or do they want a Brady?
Need one though. Yeah, like you
would.
But
oh, go ahead, Lucas.
I guess what I was trying to say is, and then another thing with that, the teams that are drafting quarterbacks most of the time aren't very good. So if they can't rush and escape the pocket behind a bad O-line, like their career is going to be just washed because they're going to not produce, and just lose all their confidence. So like a prime example is Daniel Jones. If he didn't have the rushing ability that he had last year, I feel like we wouldn't be talking about him the same way, because you watch the games where he threw 4 touchdowns. I think there's 2 of them. he had to move to throw that because that offensive line is so
Right.
bad. Even though they were playing like the Redskins and the teams weren't that great, he had to have that rush. Gardner Minshew, probably the same. I don't watch a lot of Jaguars games, but he ran for what 340 yards, I think you said. I know for a fact those weren't designed runs to Gardner Minshew where they might have been to Daniel Jones or Kyler Murray. So I feel like he's a 5th-round pick, and it worked because I think he can run the ball. So I think that's definitely a good, maybe hidden trait that teams don't see coming into the draft.
Jonathan,
Yeah,
reaction
I
to
mean,
that real quick.
yeah, no, I was just thinking now, looping back now to how this all got started with Jacob Eason and whether or not, in 3 years, when this guy has been on an NFL roster, 2 NFL rosters, he's been sitting behind starting quarterbacks, he's been coached by, obviously the best coaches in the NFL. Does he have that ability to adapt to be like what Pat Mahomes was able to adapt to, where he can break out for a long run and save a play or keep the drive alive? That's what I see lacking out of Jacob Eason in his style of play, and that's why I'm really concerned about him in the NFL. And that's why I was curious about where do we see the direction of quarterbacks going, because I think all of these quarterbacks are going to have to learn to adapt in some way because we're going through a transition period at the position. And again, this is where it gets really sticky with where do you see this quarterback versus where do I see this quarterback? Because I may see the position changing in a way that, or I might find success in the changing position differently than you might find success in the position changing. So I think that we're at a really fascinating time for quarterbacks in the NFL. And I mean, we're seeing guys like Lamar Jackson. We've never seen somebody like Lamar Jackson before. Now, all of a sudden, we're talking about Jalen Hurts as that style of quarterback. And now here's a new category of quarterbacks that now we're talking about that are evolving as successes in the NFL. And that's how I'm starting to see some, like, I just don't know if Jake Fromm has that ability. Like, we'll get to him, but that's sort of my frame of reference when I ask that question.
Lucas, one more reaction, or are you good?
No, you're good. I agree. I
Uh,
totally agree.
I was just going to mention, I guess my short version is to actually answer your question. I beat around the bush for 5 minutes, I guess. To actually answer your question, I do think it's moving toward the quote unquote dual threat. Whether it's dual threat or not, I think dual threat is different. Like Mike Vick, Lamar Jackson are dual threat quarterbacks. They can beat you on the ground and they can beat you through the air whenever they want to. Um, Dual ability quarterbacks, I think, might be a better term a little bit, which is like a
Right.
Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson is a professional pocket passing quarterback. He could be the best quarterback in the league if they fucking let him, and it crushes my heart every single season. But when the pocket breaks down or when he needs to pick up a 7-yard first down and it's open, he takes it because he has the mental. Drew Brees even still does it. Tom Brady
Right.
rushes for like 3 touchdowns a season inside the 2-yard line because he has the ability to make things happen. So I think that's an interesting thing, but I do think we are definitely moving toward that. And the position and the way that, kids growing up, high school, college, into the pros, they're idolizing whoever they get to see, right? So if Lamar Jackson is the new prototypical quarterback and it's not Peyton Manning anymore, then we're going to start seeing more kids in the schoolyard, faking options and running spread shit where they have a wide open field to do whatever they
And
want.
it's funny you say that because most of the high profile quarterbacks that we saw this year that we called at the high school level were mostly those style of
Yeah.
quarterbacks.
Of course, of course.
There are maybe 3 guys I can think of, 3 big name quarterbacks who are pocket passers. This guy going to Oklahoma State, who's an absolute fucking gunner. I mean, unbelievable. That we saw Shane. I mean, just like there's like 3 guys in in class of 50 that are prototypical pocket quarterbacks out at the high school level. It's so different.
That's awesome. Let's move on to Jake Fromm from Georgia. You mentioned he and Eason had a back and forth here. Jonathan, we'll start with you.
I don't like him. Now we're getting into the quarterbacks I don't like. He's limited arm strength. He has limited accuracy. He hasn't always made the best reads. I know the SEC title game was is a really bad, but also a good reference for that. 2 interceptions. Just got absolutely eaten alive in the backfield. It was a tough showing for sure. He's receptive. He's intelligent. His leadership, he exudes leadership. So all those intangibles are there, but I don't know if his execution is exactly where it needs to be an NFL starter, much less even maybe a second stringer on a team that's supposed to be winning. So I mean, look, I still have him as a day 2 guy, but I don't know exactly how he's going to pan out. Maybe he makes adjustments to become more accurate and to build his arm strength. But until that happens, I don't have a lot of confidence in Jake Fromm.
Yeah, it's weird, like the way I think about it, because you watch film, you watch games, you look at his numbers, you're like, no way, like not a chance he'll be an NFL quarterback. But then there's like that part of me that's like, yes, the leadership thing, that's huge. Because you think of a guy like Brady or like Russell Wilson, not comparing him to him, but like Russ is the perfect example of that. Drew Brees. I mean, even like Teddy Bridgewater when he came with the Saints last year, like not that like he played it that great, but he did enough to lead that team to a 5-0 in a
Right.
stretch. Like you think of Fromm and you're like, not a chance. But if a team looks at that, like Belichick, that just screams Belichick to me. Like he's like, oh, I can maybe teach him a few things, but he's not gonna. But I don't need to teach him leadership or something like that. So I feel like that no matter how much we dig into how good he actually is, he's gonna be an NFL quarterback this year or in 3 years when he sits behind someone. Overall talent, though, not a chance. He's not even close to any of these guys that we're going to talk about. But I think that he might have a quicker path to starting than half these guys for sure.
I agree, and we're talking about this mobile quarterback situation as kind of the new wave. It doesn't mean that pocket passers are not effective anymore. I mean, even if it was the last 10, 15 years, you think about all of these kind of at the end of the rainbow quarterbacks in the NFL, Brady, Breeze, Roethlisberger, uh, Rivers. I mean, there's a handful of them. All of those guys are pocket passers and borderline Hall of Famers, and you can have those conversations all day long, but it's effective. And a lot of times in the NFL, they call it a copycat league, right? Which obviously matters. But at the same time, a reason that the Patriots, for example, and some other coaching schemes in the NFL have been so effective over the years, like the Seahawks, is when the whole league goes this way, they go that way. So there's still going to be room for these pocket passing quarterbacks. I'm also not a huge fan of Jake Fromm. Unfortunately, just watching CBS and getting my generic college football game of the week on
Yeah.
Saturdays. It's the SEC network. I watch a ton of SEC football because that's what's on TV. And if it wasn't Alabama or LSU, it was Georgia every single week. And I watched a lot of those games. And Georgia's a great team, stellar defense every single year. Some of the best running backs we've seen out, this side of Alabama or LSU for, a decade, having multiple drafted every single year. So how much of that is Jake Fromm? And then when I see him play, he's another guy like Jalen Hurts, where I kind of sit there. I'm like, okay, I know what the stats say. I see him throwing touchdowns, like he's good, but is he like top of the SEC, one of the best quarterbacks in college football good? Definitely not, in my opinion. And so again, you're right. He'll get drafted. He will be on a team, but I don't think he's going to be challenging any current NFL starter for his job. So unless there's an injury or somebody he goes to the Steelers or something, or the Saints, and Taysom Hill's not a prototypical quarterback, and they move on. Yeah, if they move on from him and they want like that next version of that same quarterback, Jacob Fromm, I think, fits the mold pretty well if he's coachable. But unfortunately, I also am not super confident right now until we find out what team he actually landed on.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last one on the docket for now, unless you guys have some deep sleepers. Let's talk about Jordan Love out of Utah State. Lucas, we'll start with you.
I sort of take maybe a defensive stand to Jordan Love because listen to Stick to Football. They're just a football podcast. They do cover the NFL draft and prospects. They interviewed Jordan Love, and on the interview, they weren't like throwing shade at him in a way, but they were asking like, why did you not play good last year? Like that's what they straight up asked him, and he was just blaming it on the coaches because the coach that they had his junior year when he had an NFL caliber season left to Texas Tech. He was maybe going to go. He ended up staying in Utah State, and then he had a really bad season last year. And everyone wants to compare him to Patrick Mahomes just because he's undervalued with arm talent with no context. That's the only like context they can give to compare that. And to me, yes, I see the arm talents there. Yes, I see where he could be the next Mahomes or higher level quarterback. But you just, I don't know. The part of like where he didn't produce it enough in college, and the part where the main topic of conversation is only negative or question marks with him, it just kind of draws me off him. But I do see the upside when I watch him play. So I'm kind of like just in the middle. I don't really know. Still don't really know where he's going to go in the draft. Like I see him maybe going high, but I could also see him falling to like that start a round 2 where teams trade up or trade back to get that quarterback at those skill positions. So I'm kind of just like on the fence with him for now.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I'm trying to formulate my response or articulate it because this is an intriguing draft pick. I think, Lukas, you basically said everything I felt, that there's a lot of criticism surrounding his mentality and approach to the game. He is unproven in big games. No, they had the game against Michigan State. He had no touchdowns, 2 interceptions. There were 4 games where he passed. His completion percentage was fewer than 52%, and those were against lower end teams in the conference. I love Group of 5 quarterbacks. I think Group of 5 quarterbacks who are underrated end up becoming some of the bigger success stories. But I don't know if Jordan Love is going to fit that bill. He's mobile. He has a great arm in terms of strength. But yeah, he lacks accuracy. And the completion percentage is just such a bummer. They talk about how like 60% now is like the bare minimum for a potential very successful college or NFL quarterback. And Jordan Love, just not unconvincingly had a bad season in that regard. And I think that's going to really drop him down. And there's the biggest question mark surrounding his game.
Do you think his ability to be mobile-ish would help out at the bigger level? And
Yeah.
Lukas, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah.
Lukas,
so,
and with the coaching, I'm not going to agree with him or disagree with him, but unfortunately, I have a sore spot in my football fandom forever with the Alex Smith debacle in San Francisco, because coming out of Utah, Alex Smith was a dual threat quarterback. Fucking crushed it in college, actually. I think everyone's got a terrible taste in their mouth about Alex Smith, but he was incredible in college. And frankly, in 2005, it was him or Aaron Rodgers, period, out of Cal. Both Pac-10 guys at the time. And people in San Francisco were screaming for Aaron Rodgers. He's a Chico guy. He grew up in the Bay Area. Like, we all wanted him to stay locally. And we get Alex Smith. We're kind of like, okay, he's the number 1 pick. Like, let's do it. And he had 7 offensive coordinators in 8 years. Destroyed his career. He never had a chance. He left. He was an MVP for Andy Reid in Kansas City for 1 year. Of course, broke his leg in half, and now his career is probably over, unfortunately. But I'm thinking of these quarterbacks who are able to like buy time a little bit and make it happen. But Lukas, you mentioned the coaching carousel maybe, and the coaching situation that he's already had to deal with can be troublesome. Just as a high school athlete for me, and a little bit of college baseball, coaching's everything. There's a lot of not great players that become great players because of coaching. Tom Brady might be one of them, which is a conversation for another time.
Wilson, really.
There's also incredible players, incredibly talented players who don't amount to shit because the coaching's not there. So I think it goes both ways. And I am not a huge fan of Jordan Love necessarily, but it's interesting on this entire list. We're talking LSU, Alabama, Oregon, Oklahoma, Washington, and Georgia, and then Utah State. Yeah. I believe a couple years ago, Utah State, and Jonathan would probably know better than I do. Just a few years ago, I want to say maybe within the last 5 years, I'm pretty sure Utah State as a program was like ranked 122 out of 122 in college football. Either way, they were horrendous not too long ago. And so for him to be a top prospect is quite impressive.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's just a lot of like question mark. And another argument people make is he didn't have a supporting cast. Sure, but you also didn't play against good talent or good defense too. So like there's both sides to that. You watched the LSU game. They played LSU this year. I don't want to say he played good, but the tape didn't look bad. Obviously, he made good throws. Receivers dropped it. Whatever. It is, I don't know. And then him getting a lot of interviews, because I think you just listed off like 10 plus teams in that interviews. Like teams like him, and that has to mean something too in terms of just NFL readiness. So obviously, some NFL teams think that he's ready to, I don't know, maybe start this year, maybe the Colts or maybe the Patriots or whatever teams he's gonna land on. But I think that it's definitely risky, but so was Mahomes, so was Trubisky. We saw both sides of that one. So I think that there's definitely it's definitely a lottery ticket pick that, like we said, Trubisky and Mahomes, you can definitely see both sides to it.
Before we get into maybe some deeper dive players here, we can wrap up the episode so you guys can wrap your head around that really quick. Just making a mention and kind of remembering, of course, the classic the best example right now is Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, of course. If you go back and watch kind of that 2005 draft room with Aaron Rodgers, he was visibly angry that the 49ers, who he grew up being a fan of, passed on him at number 1, but then he fell and fell and fell. Then he got picked for the Packers. He knew damn well that arguably the best quarterback in the league at that time was not going to be stepping aside anytime soon. So he wasn't going to get an opportunity to play. Not only that, but Brett Favre was Iron Man and wasn't going to miss a game. So Patrick Mahomes also had that opportunity when he got drafted and sat behind Alex Smith. So as frustrating as it may be for these players, and as not sexy as it might be for us as fantasy people, and like, if Tua gets drafted this year, I want to see him on the field week 1. The best thing for Tua, in my opinion, no matter where he goes, is to not fucking play anytime soon, because he needs to get healthy. And the reality is this kid could have a 15, 20-year career, or he could have a 6-game career. And I think a lot of that is going to be decided in the next 6 months, unfortunately, for a lot of these guys.
I agree.
Awesome. Any other thoughts here on any of these guys before we get going? Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, Jacob Eason, Jake Fromm, and Jordan Love.
I just have one sleeper guy, and then we can kind of wrap up our best landing spots if we want to get into that. The only other guy, Anthony Gordon, is the only other guy I want to throw in there from Washington State. I'm going to say it right now, he's better than Gardner Minshew coming into the NFL. I'm sure he'll produce better. I'm not going to compare stats because every Mike Leach quarterback puts up fantastic production.
Record-breaking.
KJ Costello for Stanford this year, I think, is where he's at. He's going to put up the same stats that Anthony Gordon and Gardner Minshew do. So I think he's the only guy that he's been getting a lot of buzz to where I think he might jump in. I don't even know, with Eason range, maybe even Fromm range. I don't know how it's going to play out, but I think he's another guy to maybe just keep an eye on in terms of anything, NFL talent or even fantasy too, because Gardner Minshew is fantasy relevant for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree on that. I think Anthony Gordon's interesting. He's definitely, as far as talent goes, way more talented than Gardner Minshew. The problem is his path is different. He only had one real season of college football, right? He played 2 years at the City College of San Francisco. He was an unrated quarterback in high school at Terranova High School up in Northern California, out where you're from originally, I think, Sky. Yeah. And he had one very fun season at Washington State under Mike Leach. We know, but again, this is the conversation that we had around Luke Falk. This is the conversation that we had around Gardner Minshew. Now we're having it around Anthony Gordon. It's the same conversation with Washington State every single year, because this is the nature of the program. Now, Gardner Minshew, situationally, I think, got put into a really good spot because Nick Foles got injured, and he was able to get some support from the offensive line early on in the season. And, of course, the aesthetics of who he is as a person drew a lot of attention. Anthony Gordon's arm is phenomenal. His accuracy is incredible. But I just don't know how much of a success story he'll be on a winning team. I think you can get away with it with this style of play on a team that's looking to run the West Coast offense all game. But when it comes to the nitty gritty of football, I don't know. I don't know if Anthony Gordon can produce for you. He's going to be a pick. I mean, he's going to be a 4th round pick in my opinion. But I don't know what his ceiling is there. My sleeper is Cole McDonald from Hawaii. Yeah, I love this guy. Shout out to La Mirada, California, just down the road from where I currently am. Sonora High School All-Freeway League Player of the Year. He's awesome out of Hawaii. Hawaii finally won their first ever conference championship out of the Mountain West. Shout out to Nick Rolovich, the new head coach at Washington State, for leading that program.
That's my dog.
Yeah, Rolo's awesome. I had a great interview with him. Well, you're wearing the hat. That's the hat, isn't it?
No, this is the commish FFP. I actually these are our good buddies. I rock their hat every single podcast. Okay. Not to derail you really quick on Nick. Jack Rolovich, his brother and I grew up playing Little League together. So I've known
cool.
the Rolovich kids 20 years ago or whatever. But yeah, Nick's a hometown boy for sure.
Yeah, he's cool. And the way that he developed McDonald into a dual threat quarterback, and his ability to run the RPO or run a keeper or run a draw or sling it downfield is uncanny. It hurts that he went to Hawaii. It really does. But He had a really good offensive line in front of him. You put an NFL offensive line in front of him, and I think that Cole McDonald has the potential to be a contributor. I don't know where exactly that is, but I would like to see him on an NFL team, and I would like to see him getting an opportunity to play.
Yeah, for sure. I misspoke on it. It was Mississippi State, not Stanford, too, for Mike Leach. I forgot he moved there.
Yeah, he bailed.
Yeah, that's okay.
Fun times.
Fair enough. I appreciate the deep sleepers for sure. Let's get into just a couple landing spots. Some of these are easier to decipher than maybe some others, but I'd love to jump through really quick with you guys and just go through each quarterback we just mentioned to just see maybe if it's different where you want them to land. Just with opportunity, scheme, skill set. We already talked about mobile versus not mobile, all these things where you want them to land for best opportunity and maybe just reality of draft pick where you think they're going to land. Let's start at the top. Pretty easy. Joe Burrow, is there any chance he doesn't go to Cincinnati?
I mean, there's a chance, but like I'm not. It's going to take like the Dolphins 3 first-rounders or like the Chargers first for the next 2 years and like a second. So like no, like it's not going to happen.
I'm at a point in my life where I can't rule anything out just because we're sitting in quarantine right now. And like everything is so unknown and changes every moment of every day. And like at this point, who knows anything anymore? So yeah, there's a chance that Burrow doesn't go number 1. But it's a lot more likely that, I don't know, that this whole thing, who knows? Insert crazy scenario here. That's probably more likely than Joe Burrow not going number 1 in Cincinnati.
That's true.
All right, let's put him on the Bengals. Let's move down the list here. Lucas, where does Tua end up?
Where I want him to is the Chargers. I just think that'd be fun. Where I think he does, I've actually been playing around with the thought of the Jaguars trading both their first to the Dolphins. So I'm going to say Jaguars just because that seems interesting and different. But I put like Dolphins and Jaguars are probably my top 2.
Jonathan?
Yeah, Dolphins for sure. I'd like to see him on the Dolphins. I think he'll end up on the Dolphins. I think the Jags is an interesting pick. I know it's not going to happen, especially now, but it would be fun to see him on the Bears. It's not going to happen, but with that offense, and then when we get into our running back conversation, I'll have some more takes on that and that team specifically. But it would be really fun to see a Tua-esque quarterback on that team.
Love it. Let's move down to Herbert. Jonathan, we'll kick it off with you.
He is going to go to the Chargers. They are either going to trade up for him if they have insight that the Dolphins are going to take him before, or he's going to be available if they take Tua. I want this guy in Los Angeles because I want to go see him in person again, but I also want him in Los Angeles because I respect that coaching staff. They have wide receivers around him. They have a developed offensive line. That team has the tools to win. And I think that Herbert, Tyrod Taylor is a very different quarterback than Phillip Rivers is in terms of play style. I don't know if Justin Herbert is that different. And I don't think you have to make that much of an adjustment other than maybe just easing him into the system. So I would like to see him going to the Chargers, and I think he will go to the Chargers.
Lucas?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Chargers, but I think a fun one would be the Patriots. Maybe he slips and the Patriots trade up, but the Chargers have done a good job so far with this offseason. I don't think they'll ruin it by passing on him.
Really quick, 10 seconds or less. Do you think there's any chance with Jarrett Stidham in the wings and Cam Newton, as of this podcast, Cam Newton and Jameis still out there, do you think that the Patriots actually make a move to move up this far to grab a quarterback that would have an opportunity to start right away?
I don't think so.
Because where I stand with the Patriots is that take your 23rd pick and go sign Cam Newton or Jameis. Because I'm not saying they're better than Justin Herbert, but for 1 year, they'd probably produce similar to a rookie season of Herbert and Jameis Winston or Cam Newton. So I think that they would need to stay and go sign those guys and go back to the playoffs. But I could definitely – I mean, we saw Bill Belichick the last 2 years take Sony Michel and N'Keal Harry, 2 picks they didn't need. So maybe they do mess around again and move up.
Whoa, everybody needed N'Keal Harry. Come on now. That was great.
Come on. They could have taken any of the 7 receivers that went in the second round.
I love N'Keal Harry. Can you imagine Jameis on New England and how Bill Belichick –
I had a bold take.
His head would explode.
I had a bold take that they would sign Jameis Winston, they'd coach him up, and they'd go back to the Super Bowl. I mean,
Is Jameis Winston coachable enough for them to get to
I
do
don't
that?
know. I don't know
No,
if he
that's a
is, and
no.
they say he only throws 15 interceptions and still throws for 5,000 yards behind that offensive line and with that defense, that'd be unstoppable.
Yeah.
That would be true. That would be true. All right, perfect. That was 11 seconds. Well done, boys.
It's okay.
All right, let's move on to Jalen Hurts out of Oklahoma. Ruff, we'll start with you.
Late first round, middle second round pick. I'd like to see him in Jacksonville. I think that would be fun. I could even see the Patriots with that 23rd pick deciding to take him. That would be a fun experiment. Like we said, he's a process with a high ceiling. It would be fun to see him in that conference. It'd be fun to see him pitted against Josh Allen. So, yeah, I mean, I would like to see him go to the Patriots. I don't know if he'll go to the Patriots. I think he'll end up going somewhere high second round. Probably, I mean, even the Lions, I could see him going to a team like that where they develop him for a season or two and then insert him into their starting lineup.
Lucas?
Mine is the Saints, primarily because I think this is a team that can easily make a switch to an RPO read option based offense post Drew Brees with Taysom Hill, Kamara, Latavius Murray, and really only one. I mean, they have Emmanuel Sanders, but really only one wide receiver weapon. So I think that'd be a fun one. But another one, the Cowboys. I've been kind of thinking about this too. Dak's not on a contract, so who's to say if they get Hurts at their second round pick, they just let Dak play it out. Maybe then they don't pay him because one, they don't have the money to pay him anyways. They have to make money. But it'd be a very interesting sort of, I don't know, competition, or sort of Cowboys fans would go crazy. Another, like how Jonathan said, the whole psychological impact of this draft. They would go insane if they took Hurts there.
The Saints are at the 24 spot in the first round, and the Cowboys are at the 17th. So that seems a little expensive, maybe for Jalen Hurts.
Maybe
but in the back end,
something.
yeah, in the back end, neither one of those guys have a pick too quick in the second round. So we'll see what happens there. That'll be interesting. All right, let's move on to Jacob Eason, who I know there's interesting conversation between you two guys here on these next guys. Double Jake and Jordan. But let's go with Jacob Eason first. Where does he end up?
The Steelers, because I think they would be the last team to switch to a run-first quarterback system.
That's interesting. I think he's going to Indianapolis.
I like that too, though.
I could see him being a third stringer behind Brissett and Phil for a little while, and they can decide whether or not they want to keep him and develop him more or get him somewhere else. I see him going to the Rams. I could see LA taking him at like the 52nd spot. Or like the 84th spot because he might still be available and sticking him behind Goff. Yeah, I mean Goff needs a kick in the ass.
He does. He does.
And having I don't know if Jacob Eason's a true threat, but having a threat might be that motivator.
Let's move on to Jake Fromm out of Georgia. Jonathan, we'll go with you first.
I want to say undrafted, but we know in reality that's not going to happen.
UDFA, I'll mark it down.
It's like, don't waste your time. I could see him going. I think it would be interesting to see him going to Denver because his arm strength is the biggest question mark. You put him in a high altitude city against the guy in Drew Lock who has all the arm strength in the world, but not a lot of accuracy or proven accuracy. And you have a nice little battle going between two very different quarterbacks in a system that can benefit them both. So I would like to see him in Denver. I don't think it's going to happen. I think he'll end up going to probably, I don't know, like a Carolina or even like one of the LA teams.
Lucas, 30 seconds to defend yourself.
As a Broncos fan, I cannot go through another quarterback change. We just took a $13 million cap hit by losing. Like, I don't know why we cut Joe Flacco, whatever. So hopefully Drew Lock's the answer. Oh man, that would not be good. My answer for Fromm is the Colts. Primarily because the Colts don't have a quarterback on roster next year. So maybe Fromm's just like another gap player because his team's not going to be bad enough to get Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. And maybe they're just going to go 2 years of gap plays and then get their guy. I don't know. I just feel like I don't know what team would be interested in Jake Fromm is kind of like my sense over Eason, Love, even McDonald or Anthony Gordon. So I guess the Colts.
Fair enough. Last one on here, Jordan Love.
I think that I could see him going to the Saints. I could see him going to Philadelphia. This guy's is a backup guy that they're going to throw in there for options. They're going to throw in there for short yardage situations. I could see him going to Chicago, but I don't see him going to a team that really is going to contend where he's actually going to play.
Put him in Vegas with under Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota. I think that'd be a good. I don't know if those are the greatest mentors, but they would be a good sort of. Carr's really good in the accuracy, and Mariota can move. Maybe
similar skill sets.
Yeah, maybe something would like mesh out of that, I guess. And that seems like a Gruden move in his first year in Vegas.
Do we not think Washington wants to draft a quarterback?
I definitely do. Dwayne Haskins is not the dude. IMO.
No.
It's not at number 2. So like,
who would?
I don't know, because they pick at the beginning of every single round, so it'd be tough unless a guy falls to round 2. I feel like they would just be reaching every single round on the talent there, so it's kind of tough to like predict who would maybe fall there.
Yeah. No, that's an intriguing one because I could see most of these. I see Washington trying to go for all these guys. They don't really have a system. They just sort of plug and play and see what happens. Yeah.
I don't know. They need all the help they can get.
I like that. That'll wrap up those guys. Really quick before we get out of here, we're not going to get into free agent conversation. We've had plenty of those talks, and honestly, things might even happen by the time these episodes air. However, Jonathan, we haven't heard from you yet. Currently, right now, with everything that you know, where do you think the best landing spot is for both Jameis and Cam Newton?
Oh, best landing spot.
Realistic. I don't think Jameis I could see coming in and just being told, like, dude, you're a backup until you get your head out of your ass.
Right.
Cam Newton is not going to be a backup for anybody. I'm just don't think that'll happen.
I mean, I could see Jameis going to Tennessee and playing second fiddle to Ryan Tannehill until they either give up on Tannehill. Because we know how that story's probably going to go. This guy gets a new contract, runs Mariota out of Tennessee. But odds are, I don't know if he may have overperformed at the end of last season. I think he did. I don't know if this is going to be.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right,
actually,
and if that's the reality of the situation, then they're aware of that too, and they're going to want to have a backup where they can get production from. And I think that Jameis Winston might be that guy because I think you're right, Sky. I think he's going to be told right off the bat. If you're a team that believes you can contend, you're not starting Jameis Winston. It's just that simple. But having the safety net of having a quarterback like Jameis Winston on your bench is definitely something that teams want. So I think that is probably the best spot for him to go given the current, or even Dallas, given the current situations.
How about Cam?
And then Cam's tough. The Chargers are an option. I really think the Chargers want to draft a quarterback. But if they don't, that's a very viable option for him as coming to LA. It doesn't feel like teams really want Cam Newton. That's the problem.
He would have been signed by now. I mean, obviously you can't sign him, but like there would have been something by now.
It feels weird to say like, oh, this is where I think he's going to go because they're just I don't know if any of these teams actually want him. Why, like Jacksonville, for example, why doesn't Jacksonville take a knock at him? What do they see in him that is like, okay, maybe he's not the guy for our system, or the Jets even. I mean, there are these teams where he can be beneficial in those systems and he's just not going. Pittsburgh. So I don't know. I really don't know where Cam can go where he could be successful. That's the age-old question, I guess, now at this point in the season, huh?
We'll find out soon. I can't imagine we start an NFL season with both of those guys being free agents.
Where do you see Cam Newton going? I'm sure you've expressed this, but
yeah, and actually, I think Jacksonville is actually a great landing spot. I think actually that's a better spot for Jameis personally.
Okay. Yeah, that's mine right there.
Yeah, I don't want to say New England because I don't think either one of those guys would mesh well with Bill Belichick, but I think they would both, if they had like ego separation somehow, I think they'd both be very successful with the Patriots and Josh McDaniels. I just don't think that would work out well. I do think Miami and the Chargers are both in the running, obviously for some version of Tua and Herbert, and if something ridiculous happens, maybe Joe Burrow. But I just think I don't know why they would go double up on a quarterback per se, but neither one of those franchises has the guy right now. I don't hate Tyrod Taylor, but he's not the answer. And Fitzmagic is super fun, but he's not the answer. And Josh Rosen hasn't done anything productive, unfortunately for him. Not that it's his fault per se, but he's done nothing productive yet. So neither one of them have the answer. And I wouldn't be super shocked if one or both of those teams decided to pick up a big name free agent who's ready to go right now and then allow Tua or Justin to sit behind them for even if it's 4 games. We saw Baker Mayfield sit for 4 games. Tyrod went down for the Browns. Baker comes in, wins the first game in like 4 decades, and the rest is history. I could see that happening with this situation, but I think that Miami and LA, I don't think are out of the question for Cam Newton and Jameis Winston, even with all the conversation with Tua and Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is the really intriguing thing. It's like having like the old guys in the NBA who you love, like Vince Carter, but they remain unsigned. It's like, all right, like we love these guys, but like, are they really contributors? And that's how I feel like about Cam now. I feel like everybody really likes Cam. He has his haters, but I mean, do teams really want him? And we just don't know.
The problem is, what version of Cam Newton are you getting? If you're in like off season, I watch workout videos of my favorite players mode, then you're fucking pumped on Cam Newton right now because the dude's a beast and he's doing all of his workouts like DK Metcalf style with no shirt on, and the guy's a fucking animal. And I'm pumped to see him again. But then I watch like game film from the last 2 or 3 years, and the dude can't throw a ball in the air more than 20 yards. That's a problem, dude. I'm sorry. I know that he used to be the most dynamic quarterback in the league for 3 or 4 years, but he just isn't anymore right now until we see it again and he's healthy. All right, that is going to wrap up the rookie preview, NFL draft preview for the incoming quarterbacks for the NFL draft. Once again, we want to thank our good friend Jonathan Rifkind for stopping by. We have many more episodes of you, my man, though. You're not going anywhere for quite a while. We're going to be listening to him all week, and we'll be bringing him back next week as well to recap the draft quickly once everything actually goes down. Jonathan, before I get out of here, please let us know anywhere you would like to send our folks to go find your content, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, a website, a podcast, wherever you're at. Please let our folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can head over to my website, jrifkind.com. I have all of my portfolio, basically all my highlight calls, my reels, interviews, written work, all that good stuff. Twitter at Jonathan Rifkind. I mostly post about how I don't really understand what's going on in sports at times because I don't know. I think that we all think that we know things and we really don't. And so I voice my frustrations about that a lot on Twitter. And then you can go find my podcast on Believe. The Believe Podcasting Network is what we're a part of, BLEAV. They have their own website. We're across all media streaming platforms as well. And then my broadcasts are affiliated with the NFHS Network and Spectrum Sports LA. So either of those sites for those broadcasts as well.
Fantastic, brother. Thank you so much. For the TCK Podders, please make sure to subscribe and leave a comment here to the YouTube, and you can go check out all of our content at tckpod.com. We have all of our articles. We have all of our rankings coming up here, and you can, of course, find us on social media, Instagram, fantasyfootball_TCK pod, on Twitter, TCK_pod, Facebook, the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Podcast page, and, of course, anywhere you listen to your podcast, leave a rate and review. We'll catch you next time on the Candlestick Kids Fantasy Podcast for the running backs coming into the NFL draft. For Jonathan Rifkind and Lukas Kaser, I'm Sky Guasco, and we are out of here.